You're about to discover when taking an upgrade could completely ruin your cruise vacation. So when and when you shouldn't go for an upgrade. Hi, I'm Gary Bembridge and this is another of my tips for travelers. People seek out upgrades. I know that based on just how many people have watched my video of tips on how to get an upgrade. I want to take a look at the things to avoid and the things to bear in mind before you go for or chase or accept an upgrade. The four most common ways to get an upgrade are either, first of all, they're complimentary, they're sort of a surprise, and these are largely driven by also what you do when you book. So when you book, you can choose to either accept or reject an upgrade, and depending on the cruise line, sometimes you can choose to accept upgrades within the same category. So for example, from one balcony cabin to a better balcony cabin, or just to another level. So for example, a balcony to a suite or an inside to an ocean view. And it's up to the cruise line to decide if they're going to give that to you. Secondly, in some cruise lines, you can actually bid for a better room. It's very limited and there's very few cruise lines. So for example, at the time of recording, Norwegian cruise line allowed you to do this. There's not many that do that. The third one is you're given the chance to upsell. So either when you're checking in, you're given the opportunity to pay to upgrade, or sometimes before you go on the cruise, you're contacted and given the chance to pay an amount of money to upgrade. And the last one is really where you've done it yourself or your travel agent's done it, where you've noticed that they're actually discounting better cabins and they're now cheaper than what you paid for your original cabin, and you then change your booking to a higher grade of cabin or level. However, there's a massive big watch out with all of these things, because normally if you accept an upgrade or you've ticked to accept an upgrade, if the cruise line gives you the upgrade, you usually have no say whatsoever in the cabin they've given you, and you don't have a chance to go back to your original cabin. So very important, if you're going to tick the box saying you're going for an upgrade, bear in mind that you will have no say. And that's going to be a key factor as we talk about how it could ruin your cruise. Let's take a look at when taking an upgrade could actually ruin your cruise. The first of these is bear in mind that your idea of a great cabin and the cruise line's idea of a great cabin can be totally different things. So you may end up getting the cabins that nobody else wants. You might get the strange shape or the one that's in a slightly odd location. So bear in mind that if you have a very set idea about what a cabin is and a great cabin is, the cruise line doesn't necessarily have that same checklist. So you might find they move you to a cabin which in their view is a better cabin. However, that may not be your idea, and therefore you go to a cabin that you're not comfortable with. The second way it can really ruin your cruise vacation is if you're very specific and very picky about the location you want. So for example, you're very worried about noise, so you don't want to be under the disco or the restaurants or the theatre. Or perhaps you want to be really central, so it's very easy and you're close to all of the different facilities around the ship. Or perhaps you want to be in a certain location because you're traveling with friends or family, so you want to be in the same area of the ship. So if you have a very specific thing about the location, you want to be in the front of the ship, the back of the ship, or very importantly, if you're worried about being seasick, you like to be low down and midships. So if you're very picky about where your cabin is on the ship, I would strongly recommend don't take a look at upgrades, because you could be moved from a great location that you love to an area that is actually everything that you dislike. The third reason is if you're very specific and picky about your cabin itself. So for example, you want a cabin that has no interconnecting door with the cabin next door, or you want one that does have an interconnecting door, or you want a cabin that has a bath, or you want one that's only got a shower, you want one with two basins, you want one that doesn't have an obstructed view. Or for example, you want a cabin that can be easily divided by a curtain because you know that you get up before your partner or traveling companion. If you're very picky and specific about what your cabin has and the layout and the features, I'd recommend do not take an upgrade, because you could get moved to a cabin that doesn't have it. So I'm very fussy about certain things in the cabin. I don't like interconnecting doors. I like having a bath. So I tend not to go for upgrades because I would be very unhappy if I lost some of the things that I spent a lot of time choosing to have very specifically in my cabin. If you have a need for an accessible cabin, I would also recommend not taking an upgrade. So if you need wheelchair access or you need other accessible features within your cabin, don't go for an upgrade. There are a very limited amount of accessible cabins on cruise ships. So if you've got one because you need one, don't go for an upgrade, because it's very possible that you'll be upgraded to a cabin that doesn't have the space or the facilities that you need for accessibility. Another good reason for not taking an upgrade is the chance that you'll lose your perks with your booking. Now this tends to apply much more if you've taken a deal and you're paying to upgrade. So you might have got a deal, for example, which has included some Wi-Fi or a drinks package or some onboard credit. Often cruise lines will let you pay to upgrade to a better cabin or a better grade. However, they might then only give you the perks associated with that new deal. So for example, you've booked a while ago, you've got a great package with drinks package, some specialty dining, onboard credit, and you've bought a balcony cabin, for example, and you see a great deal come along where you can get a suite for the same price. However, that might only have a small amount of onboard credit, and if you change your booking, which is possible, to upgrade, you lose all of those benefits, and actually the upgrade then could not be at all appealing because you've lost a lot of great perks and benefits. So very importantly, if you're paying to upgrade, check if the original perks associated with that booking are going to stay and move with you, or you're going to lose them. So for example, I booked a cruise recently where I had some specialty dining, I had a drinks package, I had some free Wi-Fi, all the gratuities were paid. But if I chose an upgrade where I could pay an upgrade, I was going to lose all of those and just get a small amount of onboard credit. It really wasn't worth it. Linked to that, and very important, is if you're looking to upgrade because you want to get extra perks, check that with the upgrade all the perks of going to a higher grade come with it. So you might find with some grades, for example, you get things like priority embarkation, disembarkation, priority tendering, canapes in the evening, a complimentary minibar, some free dining in the specialty restaurants. However, people who get free upgrades might not get those perks. So your free minibar or the canapes or whatever other perks are associated with that. So very importantly, if you're upgrading and chasing perks rather than just the space and the bigger cabin, check that you're going to get those perks, or again, it could really put a dampener on your cruise because you're not going to get what you expected. This next one is probably a little bit frivolous, but if you're actually concerned by moving from an inside to a balcony or from a balcony to a suite, you're going to find it very difficult to go back. You might want to hold back on taking that upgrade because you might find that your whole future cruising cost and experience is slightly ruined because now you've experienced the balcony and you don't want to go back to an ocean view or inside. So bear in mind that upgrades could slightly spoil you, and I've seen on many forums have said the problem with going with a suite is they find it very difficult to go back, or once they had a balcony, it was very hard to convince their partner to go back to an inside or an ocean view. Now, all upgrades aren't necessarily great value, and this particularly applies if you're paying for an upgrade. So perhaps when you're checking in or just before the cruise, you're offered a chance to pay a little bit to upgrade. Do the maths and check that it really is worth it. Don't assume because you're being offered an upgrade that it's great value. Do the maths and check that actually, first of all, that's not what you would have paid anyway. So actually you're not really getting any saving because you could have just booked that higher grade anyway. If you're offered an upgrade and you're paying, do the maths to make sure that you suddenly don't find yourself in a better cabin, realizing actually it's not a real upgrade. I'm just paying what I would have paid anyway for this cabin. Another really important aspect, some cruise lines do this, is they offer upgrades but within a category. So you might be in a balcony and they will offer you or give you an upgrade from perhaps what they consider a less good balcony to a bigger balcony or a better balcony, or from the front of the ship or the back of the ship, and they've moved you to midships. But very importantly, that may not be a big enough upgrade. Ask yourself, if I get moved to a better balcony, if I get moved to a better ocean view and I'm already paying for that, is it really worth the hassle, particularly if you've chosen a cabin that you like? An upgrade is only an upgrade if it's much better. So one of the things to really think about is upgrades within a specific category. Is it really a big enough upgrade that's going to make your cruise so much better? So there are times when taking an upgrade, I think, could really dampen and ruin your cruise. There are, of course, times when upgrades are fantastic. So, for example, you're moving to a bigger cabin, a bigger category, and it's not costing you anything, and you're going to get to experience something much bigger, much better, because you are always on a cruise ship going to use that extra space, and it gives you a chance to entertain or have people over or just spread out and enjoy yourself. But do bear in mind that if you are going the upgrade route, there are ways that it could really dampen it. So if you are really fussy about where your cabin is located because you're worried about noise or access to facilities, or there's things in your cabin that you really, really like that are very specific, an upgrade could wipe those out. So generally when I cruise, I don't go for the upgrade option because I like to spend a lot of time thinking about where I like my cabin to be, and there's things that I like in my cabin, and I'm much happier to know that I've got a cabin that I really like, and I'm prepared to forego the upgrade option. Of course, there are times when I have gone for upgrades and had an amazing time. So I've been upgraded, for example, into a magnificent penthouse suite with a dining room and all sorts, and that was just absolutely magical and fantastic. There are times when it works. However, generally speaking, think about those things and what's really important to you on a cruise, and if they get wiped out and you get something in a cabin that doesn't have all of those, how are you going to feel about it? Make sure it doesn't dampen or get in the way of having a great cruise. Hopefully you found that helpful and interesting. It's given you something to think about. If you like this video, I'd love it if you watch many more of my Tips for Travelers videos. They're designed to help you make the most of your very precious travel time and money on land, on sea, and on rivers.